Alright, forgot to transfer my cheat sheet over, so this will truly be a live coding event. We'll see how this goes. Alright, questions so far? Cool. So today we're going to look at basically building an Alexa skill that runs in Amazon's or AWS Lambda. So I have a bunch of links here for a bunch of different things. In terms of setting up your stuff for that, there's actually a number of different approaches you can take. You can go directly into the Lambda console. There are actually templates for sort of for Python Alexa skills, and you can certainly play around with those. Additionally, though, there is a framework called called Flask-Ask that actually is basically designed to sort of make some of this stuff a bit easier. So that's actually the approach that we're going to take today. I'll kind of show you setting that up and all of that. Let me go ahead. So I'll create a new project here. Yes, a Python project. Sure. Okay, so there's my, I am going to use VirtualEnv for this, for this, and generally you want to do that, especially for using additional libraries and things. So again, I'll go to Project Interpreter, and let me go ahead and create a VirtualEnv, and again, I'll just do the usual stuff of placing it in the appropriate folder. So basically the same folder as my code. There's downloads, here's courses, that, and again, create a new folder. The one thing though, especially for when you're dealing with Flask-Ask, you do not want inherit global site packages checked. Again, and because of the fact that basically Flask-Ask is going to sort of upload anything we have in our VirtualEnv to the server, so we don't want to be relying on other packages that happen to be installed on just this machine. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so while that's creating that, let me go over here. Just kind of talk a little bit about some of the stuff that is here. So. You'll see I have a couple of links here. One, this Flask-Ask, a new Python framework, right? So basically, this is Amazon's blog post on the framework and all of that, kind of showing you a quick down and dirty example of how to make use of this. The other one actually talks about how to go about deploying your skill. So again, I mean, you can use Flask-Ask and you can bundle everything up manually and then upload it. I actually was not successful in doing that, and oddly enough, there's not really a lot of documentation for using it in that fashion. For the most part, the documentation is go use Zappa. So Zappa is there. That is what I will actually show you how to use, because that one will actually work. Link to some tutorials and things like that. The home page and all of that. All right, let's go over here. Yeah, cool, that's set up. All right, so basically the tools that I want. All right, is this the one? Nope, I want the Zappa one. Right, so in the Zappa one here, they talk about again creating a virtual environment. They're doing it kind of manually from the command line, but other than that, we don't have to worry. Then installing the dependencies, right? So these are most of these are the dependencies. For what we're working on, we're actually not going to use the requests module from Python, but the other ones we do actually need. So let me go ahead and install those, right? So just do Flask-Ask. And what else do we need? I believe we need, yeah, Zappa and AWS CLI. Actually don't need Zappa just yet, but I know we are going to use it, so I'll go ahead and get that installing, and also AWS CLI. There it is. Okay, so theoretically, it's installing all of that stuff. Yes, Flask-Ask is installed. Cool. Yes, it's installing the rest of the stuff, etc. All right. So yeah, that's still installing, but I'll go ahead and create my my stuff here. There's kind of not much of a purpose to this particular skill other than to just kind of demonstrate how to use this. So I've been calling it the useless skill. I'll continue to do so. And then we're going to need a couple of imports and so forth. So mainly we're going to need this. Let's see. I'm going to grab all of this, but actually I'll end up paring this down. As I said, we're not using requests. I don't actually need this one either. And yeah, it's still actually, yep, still installing that stuff.
Sir, import logging. So, like, what does logging?
As that, I mean, basically, it's a package for doing logging. In particular, basically, what we're going to do with it, I'll show you. It is it's actually this one here. This was actually what I wanted. So. So this line here, line 9, basically turns on debugging level logging for the Flask-Ask framework, which means when we're doing our testing, we'll actually sort of be able to see kind of what the exchange is and those kinds of things. So that's the main reason that we're using it here. In production, you probably wouldn't have this line, but you might actually use the various logging levels to basically just create your own kind of logs and all of that. Yep, that's still running. All right. So, some stuff about some general concepts, vocabulary, etc. So for developing an Alexa skill, okay, first of all, basically, we will have to kind of venture outside of the AWS space. So I have this link here for the Amazon Alexa developer page, right? This isn't part of the, notice this is not built into or part of AWS directly. But I can sign in with my same credentials. Okay, and so I'll go to, yes, my Alexa dashboard. So add a new skill. So here's where we can essentially start to configure basically our Alexa skill itself. Okay, you'll notice there's actually a few different APIs that we can essentially build on, right? So there's sort of this custom interaction model. That's for most general kinds of things. Notice video skill API. Amazon now has I believe it's the Alexa Show that basically is a little propped up tablet type of Alexa deal and things. So you have that. Flash briefings typically pretty quick news little things. Notice smart home stuff for doing automation and all of that. So we give it a name, whatever we want to call it. And then we need an invocation name. The invocation name is basically what's used when the user talks to Alexa to invoke your particular skill, right? So I'm just gonna, again, I'll call it, continue to call it useless skill. Global fields, notice, so we have some other options for whether we're going to play audio, whether we're going to play video, etc. Just leaving all of those off. The interaction model, okay? So this is where it gets a little hairy looking, but it actually isn't that bad, okay? So this is the section where essentially you start to set up how a user is going to interact, basically by speaking to your application. Okay. So there are a couple of different parts to this. One is this sample utterances. Basically, first of all, it's a list of essentially examples of what the user can say to your particular skill. Okay, so I actually have these. I'll just kind of show you. Let me open this up in Notepad++. Thought I had them. Did I not count? I think I have them in the other one. Okay, cool. Let's go back over here. Let's see, let me go to all skills, let me go to here. That's going to be an issue in a minute as I think about that. All right. So our intent schema creates, I guess, what you could almost think of as events, right? So notice it uses this JSON format. So basically, what we have is we have this JavaScript object. We have this top level key for intents. Then we basically have a list of JavaScript objects for each of our intents. So our base intent is just called useless intent, right? The intent part here that's required. I can call the intent whatever my little heart desires. Right. So I have one for useless intent that we'll see kind of how that gets activated and so forth. Additionally, I have this intent, a second intent, the count intent, and then notice it has a section for slots. Slots are basically parameters to that particular intent. Okay. Now, how is this going to be used? Well, essentially, here are some examples.
So,
yes.
What's an intent?
An intent basically the idea behind an intent, right, is almost as the name suggests, right? So it suggests what the user is trying to do, some particular endpoint for your application. So in our case, we essentially have two intents. We can either the user can say trick or treat, in which case that gets handled by the useless intent, or they can say tell me a joke, and that also gets handled by the useless intent. They could also say count down from, and then here we have a parameter. basically some number, or count from, basically taking out the down part from that. Either way, those basically are going to be executed by the or handled by the count intent. Okay. Now, again, going back to here, so if we take a look at our count intent, notice there is a single slot, right? So we have an array of slot objects where there's only basically one slot object. The name of it that I've given is num. I could give it whatever name that I wanted. Again, I could call it foo, etc. And here, the type that I'm specifying is it's going to be a number, right? So there it is. Yeah.
So basically, Alexa just uses like just interface to which you are talking, yes, and it like performs commands. It's more, yes.
Right. Right.
And internally it uses Lex, yes.
I would imagine it does use Lex for understanding that. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the basic idea behind that, right? So we have a single intent that doesn't have any slots. We have another intent that does have slots. Here I happen to be using one of the built-in slots. There are slots, for instance, for localities, cities, states, etc. There are other kinds of slots. You can actually create your own custom slots where you say, okay, here are the possible things that could be said, etc. Okay. Basically just kind of keeping it simple here. And you can see this is actually where you would kind of create your custom slots and all of that. Oh, yeah, sorry. This is in the wrong place. Should be in sample utterances. All right, so once we have that stuff in, I'm going to go ahead and click next. It will basically spin for, so you'll notice it kind of spins for a little bit as it's, quote, building the interaction model. Okay. Then we get to this part that we don't have the stuff for just yet, so let's go and write some code. Okay, so now we have this. That's cool. Let me just double check all of that. Yeah, there's Flask-Ask. There's AWS CLI. There's Zappa. Okay, we have all of our different the different packages that we need. I think I mentioned this last time. I briefly talked about Flask itself. Flask is actually a web framework for Python, and so essentially Flask-Ask basically just adds some additional kind of helpers, niceties, etc. for basically creating Alexa skills on top of Flask. Okay, so it's actually fairly easy to use and so forth. Let's kind of take a quick look at some of this. So to handle intents, basically all you need to do is create a function and decorate it with the ask intent for whatever intent you happen to be using, right? So I can say, okay, here's the function for dealing with that. I'm going to call it joke because that's ultimately what we'll do. We'll sort of return a joke.
So it's basically the same to Chalice.
Pardon? Yeah, it's very similar to it's Chalice and Flask-Ask are kind of essentially, they're all kind of working on that very similar model of, okay, right, instead of it, whereas with Chalice we have a root, right, here basically we just decorate it with an intent. But yeah, you're right, it's not terribly, it's not rocket science.
Professor, that annotation, is it a necessary component, or are we just using it because coded?
No, this is what makes this function basically be able to handle that particular intent. So yeah, it absolutely is necessary. All right. So let's do. All right. It was Halloween yesterday. Let's grab a couple of Halloween jokes here. Oh, throw another one in. All right, so there's those. Oops. So I have, so notice I basically have this this list of 2 jokes here. Essentially, the idea is that when someone invokes the useless intent, we're going to give them a random one of these. Okay, easy enough. Basically, we can return a statement. And basically, so statement is the way that that we can get Alexa to speak the particular result. And then what I can do is simply say random choice of jokes. So that selects a random element from a list. And that's it.
Officer, can you set up a voice as like
You cannot. You cannot change the particular voice that is used. You do actually have a ton of control over inflections and various things and all of that. But yeah, you can also you do have the ability to play audio file like you saw when we were. So if we turned that on, you could actually pass along sort of an additional an audio file to play.
So you can have a skill that denotes that plays the MP3 with a specific voice.
Yep. Right. All right. So there's the base part of this, right? I haven't built out the rest and all of that. Let's kind of play around with this, see what else we might want to do. So for local testing, even before deploying this, basically what I'm going to do is we'll add in this into the bottom of our file. Okay. This if underscore name stuff, basically this is the Python equivalent of Java's main method or C's main function, etc. Right? This is essentially how you build this. Essentially, what it says is basically if we've run this this file, say from the console or whatnot, then we're actually going to then we'll do this step. If we happen to import this as a module, then we wouldn't actually be running this particular step. Okay, so having done that, let's go ahead and run our skill. Right, and so there it is. It's basically our skill is running. Okay, now. For testing, there's a whole host of different ways that we can test it. Ultimately, basically, what we're just gonna do is take that skill that we're creating within the Amazon Skills Kit and essentially point it at this. Here's the issue that we have, however. Okay, there's really 2 issues. One, notice this is running on HTTP, not HTTPS. Okay, so. We have to actually have it running on HTTPS. Certainly once we deployed it to Lambda, all of the wrappers will basically take care of that for us. However, we don't have that going on right here. So for local testing, what they essentially suggest you do is to make use of this thing. Where is it? Well, that's the Zappa one. Yeah, ngrok. So there's the ngrok command. I could certainly add it to. I could add it to my. I could add it to my path. I'm just going to copy it over into the same folder with my code for right now, just for running it. So with our server running, right? Oops, not the Python console. It's not what I wanted. Right. So this is, notice, this is actually running on, or listening on port 5000, right? So with ngrok, basically, and again, let's just do. right? So run ngrok. The protocol that our server is using right now is HTTP. The port that it is using is port 5000. And so you'll notice we get kind of all this information here. The part that we're interested in is the forwarding part, the one that actually has HTTPS. So I'm going to grab this and copy it. And then we'll go back over to the developer. There it is. Okay. Endpoints, right? So we're using HTTPS, and then I can paste in that particular URL. Right, the rest of the stuff I don't need to worry about. I can leave all the defaults on here. Let me go ahead and click Next. Okay. Then it asks about the certificate information. Okay, essentially what we want here is the one that talks about a wildcard certificate. Okay, so make sure to turn that on. And now we are at the testing phase. Now, actually, since I have two skills here that that both have this have that same, let me do this a minute. Okay. So for testing, we can actually do this a couple of different ways. You'll notice there is this test option here, and so there is this service simulator. So for instance, I could just say launch useless skill, and there was some sort of error. Died a horrible death. Great. There we are. Right, so just telling it to launch. Notice here is sort of roughly the JSON response that we essentially get back. Now that's not terribly interesting, but we could.
Why did the skeleton cross the road
to get to the body
shop?
Okay. So you can listen to it, etc. Also, there is, so.
Knock.
Right, so you can do that. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. You can certainly kind of play around with all of that. What's even actually more interesting is this one here, EchoSim. Okay, so EchoSim basically gives you kind of a virtual Amazon Echo to test your stuff with. So if I log in here, it will have access to the apps that I've deployed. All right, let's see. Hopefully the setup is right. Basically, I have to use the microphone that's built into the computer for Panopto to record, and then I have my phone acting as a mic. So let's see. Launch useless skill.
I cannot resolve
the host name for the requested skill.
Really? Hi.
Hello.
Let's try that.
Hello.
The host name. That's interesting. Useless skill. Launch useless skill.
I cannot resolve
the host name for the requested skill.
Tell useless skill trick or treat.
I cannot resolve
the host name for the requested skill.
That is strange. Okay.
Is ngrok running?
Why did the skeleton?
Why did the skeleton cross?
Yeah, okay. So that one's working. I'm not sure. Let's try. Tell useless skill, trick or treat.
I cannot resolve.
I cannot resolve the host name for the requested skill.
All right, come back to that. We'll see what happens when we ultimately deploy it. I'm not sure why it's dying a horrible death. All right. Let's take a look at building something a little more complicated, right? So we saw we have our interaction model here that and our sample utterances that will allow us to also ask our useless skill to do a countdown for us. Okay, so the idea is that that basically we'll be able to ask the skill, okay, count down from some particular number. Right. Now, the question ultimately becomes, how do we actually get this thing? Okay. It's that easy. Now, it's easy, but it's not. In the following sense, the name of the parameter here must match exactly what we have in our configuration. So here, notice we've called it num, all in lowercase. Therefore, here, inside the brackets, I have to use num, all in lowercase, and therefore as the parameter, I have to call it num, all in lowercase. Okay? If I don't, it doesn't get it. Okay, so for that, I don't know if I talked about this function in here before, so I'll just bring it up. Right. So Python has this function called range, and you can actually use it for a couple of different things. So notice, for instance, if I say range of 10, basically, so get back this thing that sort of looks weird, but if I turn this into a list, you can actually see what I'm really getting back, right? So basically this says start at 0, count up to, but not including, well, whatever that stop number is. Now you can start counting at whatever values you want as well. So if I place, if I have 2 values in here, notice we now have this. So we have our start value and 1 past the end. Additionally, you can do an increment value. So what that means is you're also able to do things like this. So that's basically what we're going to use. So nums is equal to the range of num, 0, and -1. Okay. Now the only thing is, num itself is actually going to come in as a string. So we'll make sure to convert that like so. I'll turn it into a list. Now, the other thing, I think I actually did show this one, right? Recall the join function or method in Python, right? So join takes a list and basically joins together all of the elements in the list with whatever that particular string is. So I get that. The only thing is, that doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because the list has to be a list of strings. So I can fix this by doing something like str of num of n for n. Oops. Oh, from, no, for. Like so. Which is all I'm going to do here. So, actually, I'll type it out. And there it is. All right.
So that num is also a list only, no?
Pardon?
That nums is also a list, now we can directly put list in.
Nums is a list. No, I can't put list here, right? No, the variable is itself. The variable is nums. Right. Okay, so that's running. Let's give this a try. So let's go back over to our...
Master,
Yes.
why are you giving statement a string? Why can't you give it a list?
Statement takes a string. Basically it is, statement takes essentially a string of what it is that you want Alexa to say.
So Alexa won't be able to read a list.
Can't read a list, right? So I have to convert that somehow into a string.
Is there a limitation on how much we can?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there is a limitation. I mean, I could certainly imagine that there, you can certainly imagine that there could be the case that if you are providing a ton of text, that it's just going to kind of ramble on, and and that leads to kind of a usability issue. All right, let's see. Count down from 5.
Five, four, three, two, 1.
5 should be like 5, or I can write the max 5.
Well, so I mean, so notice. I mean, basically, when we say 5, right? Alexa actually basically gets likely something like this, based on the fact that I've said though that the type is supposed to be a number. It actually is going to convert that into the appropriate number for us.
Okay, that is what does it do if you write 5?
If I put 5, the same.
5,
4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's see if this is working now or not. Ask useless skill countdown from 5.
I cannot resolve
the host name for the requested skill.
That is really worked all day yesterday. All right. Okay, so we have our skill developed. It is working, apart from EchoSim's not playing with it for some reason. Let's look at deploying this thing. Okay. So let's see. So I have that running. So I can stop this now. I can also stop ngrok here. Yeah, Control C isn't working. Just kill the terminal. All right. So to deploy this, as I said, the recommended way, generally most of the demos that you're going to see and tutorials and all of that online, they all suggest using Zappa. So the way that basically we installed Zappa when we installed our various packages. The first thing we need to do is Zappa init. Okay, basically that kind of adds into this particular this project the stuff that Zappa needs for its configuration. And you'll see it's interactive. right? So it tells, okay, it's a system running serverless Python web apps on Lambda, on AWS Lambda and AWS API Gateway, right? And I should notice, right? So Dimitri, right? Yeah, you mentioned, so you point out, you said, well, it kind of looks like Chalice. Actually, Zappa is somewhat of a competitor to Chalice. It actually came out before, Zappa itself came out before Chalice, and then basically Amazon released Chalice. So it turns out that while you're able to, while you are able to, for instance, create a Python Alexa skill and deploy it directly to Lambda without using anything else, that is not what Zappa actually does. Okay, Zappa does deploy it to Lambda, but it also actually creates a AWS API gateway for it. It uses a protocol called WSGI to kind of wrap stuff up and allow those that to happen. Okay, so I'll just again, I'm going to go through this, basically just selecting all of the defaults. So yes, call it dev. Yeah, they found, let's see, okay, so they found this. Oh, okay, yep, I'm going to use default. That's fine. Notice I do need to have a bucket for it, and again, it'll generate sort of a unique bucket name for my code. It says yes, we figured out that it's a Flask application, figured out that yes, it's useless skill, and basically we have app as our Flask thing. So again, I can just go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to go with the default here, which is no. And then it basically pops up, says, okay, here's what the settings file essentially looks like for this, right? So it's just a JSON file. It says, okay, there's the function, there's the regions, etc. We'll do yes, and now essentially we've done the setup for this. Okay. In terms of deploying, it's right there. Zappa deploy dev. Yeah.
It automatically created a bucket where?
In S3.
In your S3?
Yep.
But you didn't provide any of your credential, like you didn't call the anything like that.
It's using the same thing that basically, because remember basically uses the same thing from AWS configure. Right, since we set up AWS configure and I have my credentials, my access key, my secret key, etc. That's what it's using.
So you can actually deploy in such a way, not just the Flask-Ask application, but like different applications.
Yeah. Yeah, Zappa. You don't have to use Flask-Ask to use Zappa. Zappa's kind of its own. Takes a minute or so. Bucket's not created yet. Why is it? It's pokey. Oh, there we go.
For using Alexa, is it free to create account and use like this
Right. So the Alexa side using for the Alexa side of stuff is free. Right. There's not really a cost for you creating the app. Any costs incurred by using the AWS services on that obviously. Okay.
If I create a skill, is it globally available or is it available?
It's globally available once you publish it. Right. So if you go to
Any Alexa can use it?
yeah. Right. So so then there's publishing information and all. Right. So essentially, once you can basically deploy it. There is an approval process that it basically has to go through to kind of check that the porn's not allowed, some other things and so forth. But the approval process seems fairly straightforward. Over the summer, I got my first Alexa and I started playing around and developed. It took about a day to get the approval.
And is there a way to just build a skill only for now?
Only for yourself? I'm not aware that there's a way necessarily to have just a private skill. Apart from, I mean, kind of what we're doing here, which is basically we really sort of have this set up for testing only. And basically in that case what'll happen is if I had my Alexa here, it would actually allow me to access, just this. So, I mean, in some senses you can kind of do it, but it really is just limited to sort of that one account. All right, let's see what this thing is up to. Yeah, there we go. So it deployed. Here is the here's that stuff there. Let me go ahead and copy that, and so we'll come over to here. Amazon's in the process of kind of figuring out how to get more and better skills developed for Alexa. So generally each month they typically have some sort of promo for if you develop a skill and publish it, you get something or other. Actually in August you got a free Echo Dot. So I wrapped up a quick skill, posted that, got my Echo Dot. Cool. Right now this month it's a T-shirt. But so yeah, if you kind of follow this and check it, one of the areas they're looking to build out is the gaming area. They're trying to formulate how to basically what they've said is they're going to look at sort of the top performing skills in different categories and figure out some way of monetizing that for developers. So if you have a very popular skill and all that, theoretically Amazon will give you money for it then. Start paying you royalties or whatnot. So, interesting kind of thing to play around with. All right, back to configuration here. Okay, so now that I have this, let me paste that in there. Yep. Yeah.
Is there a kind of application that allows you to fill the web forms using the voice?
Can you fill a web form with a voice? Theoretically, you could. I guess part of it's just because unless you're talking about an Alexa show, remember you don't have a screen. It's pure voice input that you're basically dealing with, and it's not necessarily running on a website. Now, on the other hand, if you did want to provide for voice input on, say, a website, then you could use, for instance, AWS Lex directly from your website itself to allow people to speak in and things like that. All right. Right, there that is. Wonder if this works now. Ask useless skill trick or treat.
I cannot resolve
the host name for the requested skill.
That is really weird. Totally worked yesterday. So I'm not sure why it's... Really don't know why it's... I thought... Given that error, I thought that the issue that it was having had to do with maybe ngrok being able to connect back to the local server, but that's not the case, so I'm not sure.
Should you provide additional information to EchoSim? Because It's like useless skill will be registered in different accounts.
It knows about it because I'm logged in with the same credentials that I have for that I'm logged in through Amazon as well, through AWS as well. So yeah. So all right. So that kind of gives you a basic idea of Alexa. Again, another kind of use case for Lambda and things like that. As I said, so you know, Lambda generally is kind of the recommended way that that Amazon recommends building up skills and all of that. You can program it in Python using kind of the techniques that we've seen. There's Node.js that runs on Lambda, so there's actually a whole Alexa skills kit that you can download for JavaScript to code up in that fashion if JavaScript is your thing and so forth. All right, see you next time.